The world map you know is a lie. It shows a planet divided by borders, but secret cartographers from forgotten cultures saw a different Earth entirely. They mapped the world using stars, stories, and songs, creating a vision of our planet without a single dividing line. You will discover how ancient navigators crossed entire oceans by memory, and how entire continents were charted through epic poems. This journey uncovers a profound connection between humanity and the planet, offering timeless wisdom for our fragmented world. How did medieval scholars draw a world united by faith while Europe was lost in darkness? And what incredible accuracy did they achieve without our modern tools? By the end, you will see the entire map of human history redrawn through the eyes of those who saw the Earth as one living whole. What does it truly mean to know a place? A map drawn on parchment can be folded and stored away, but a map woven into the very fabric of a culture lives forever. For the secret cartographers, the act of mapping was inseparable from the act of living. Take the Polynesian wayfinders, masters of the Pacific Ocean. They did not see an empty, terrifying expanse of water. They saw a highway, navigated by reading subtle patterns invisible to the untrained eye. They memorized the direction of ocean swells as they reflected off distant islands. They charted courses by the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. They watched for specific species of birds, knowing their flight paths pointed the way to land. This was not a simple collection of facts. It was a deep, dynamic conversation with the sea. Similarly, Inuit hunters traversing the Arctic did not carry paper charts. They held immense, detailed mental maps of the sea ice, passed down through generations in stories. They knew which ice was safe to travel, which cracks led to seal breathing holes, and how the shape of snowdrifts revealed the wind's history. Their map was a living entity, changing with the seasons, a testament to survival built on intimate knowledge. And in Australia, Aboriginal elders did not see a barren landscape. They walked a world sung into existence during the Dreamtime. Every rock, every waterhole, every mountain range was part of an epic creation story, and the paths between these sites were traced in songlines. To sing the song was to navigate the land, to reaffirm a sacred connection to ancestors and the living earth. These were not maps of territory, but maps of meaning. They emphasized relationships, the delicate threads connecting people to their ancestors, to the animals they relied on, and to the land that sustained them. This holistic view created a world without hard borders, a world where the planet was understood as a single, interconnected home. How then did these cultures physically record such a fluid and profound understanding of space? The answer lies in astonishing artifacts that blend science, art, and spirit. This celestial map was not etched in stone or parchment, but in memory. The Polynesian star compass transformed the night sky into a perfect, rotating guide. The horizon was a circle divided into 32 houses, each one named for a star that rose or set at that precise point. A navigator would sit in their canoe, feeling the swell of the ocean, and watch the celestial dome turn overhead. They knew that the star known as Hokulea, our Polaris, sat almost motionless in the north, a fixed pivot point for the entire system, but the true genius was in its fluid application. The star compass was never a rigid set of instructions. It was a framework for constant observation. When clouds obscured the stars, the navigator read the direction of the ocean swells, the long, deep waves that maintained their course for thousands of miles. They watched the flight paths of certain seabirds at dusk, knowing these birds always returned to land, revealing the direction of an unseen island. They learned to read the subtle color of the clouds, a faint greenish tint that could mean a lagoon was reflecting light onto the underside of a cloud bank far ahead. This knowledge was not written in books. It was encoded into chants, into songs that were recited for generations. A master navigator would take a young apprentice on a voyage, teaching them to feel the movement of the canoe, to memorize the rhythm of the stars, to trust the signs of the sea. This was how they discovered and settled islands scattered across an ocean that spans nearly a third of our planet. They were not crossing an empty void. They were traveling a highway they knew intimately, a realm of interconnected pathways defined by nature itself. There were no borders, only relationships between islands, stars, and sea. The map was the journey itself, a living understanding written in the mind and soul. Yet, on the other side of the world, an entirely different kind of map was being drawn, one not of the stars but of the very sound of the land. While the Polynesian navigator looked to the stars, an elder in the Australian outback closes their eyes and listens to the land itself. Here, the world is not plotted by celestial houses but woven from sound. The entire continent is crisscrossed by songlines or dreaming tracks, which are not mere footpaths but the very pulse of creation. Every landmark, from the smallest waterhole to the grandest mountain range, is a stanza in an epic, sung narrative. To walk a songline is to sing the country into being, retracing the footsteps of ancestral beings who shaped the world in the dreamtime. The song itself is the map, a living cartography that does not simply describe the land but actively sustains it. An elder does not walk from point A to point B. They are performing a sacred duty, reenacting the journeys of the Creator ancestors. With each verse sung at the correct location, they maintain the spiritual vitality of that place, reinforcing a covenant between the people and the land. This is a relationship of profound custodianship, not ownership. The land owns the people, and the song is their promise to care for it. This auditory map is also an immense library of practical knowledge. The lyrics encode crucial survival data, the locations of water sources, the migratory patterns of animals, and the properties of plants. A single songline can stretch for hundreds of miles, containing generations of ecological and historical wisdom passed down perfectly through melody and rhythm. In this worldview, there is no line separating the map from the territory. The song is the land, and the land is the song. One cannot exist without the other. This dissolves the very idea of a border, creating a world that is a continuous, living story. This seamless fusion of science and spirit finds a stunning parallel in a medieval workshop, where a different kind of visionary was drawing a world united not by song but by faith. Inside a medieval palace in Sicily, a scholar named Idrisi was weaving the entire known world onto a single disc of silver. His masterpiece, the Tabula Rogeriana, was commissioned by a Christian king, yet it drew upon the accumulated wisdom of Greek, Persian, and Indian geographers, all filtered through an Islamic worldview. This was not a map of kingdoms, but a map of the earth. It showed a single, interconnected landmass, meticulously detailed with rivers, mountains, and cities, all encircled by a vast world ocean. Its accuracy, from the sources of the Nile to the shape of the Caspian Sea, would not be rivaled in Europe for centuries. At the heart of this sprawling geographical vision was a spiritual center. Islamic maps often placed the holy city of Mecca not as a political capital but as a spiritual pivot for the entire Muslim world. This was a profound conceptual shift. The map was no longer centered on a royal palace or an imperial city. It was centered on a site of universal faith, a point that transcended every earthly border of tribe or nation. The cartography itself became an act of devotion, visualizing a global community, the Ummah, united by belief. Idrisi's work overflowed with the vibrant reality of a connected planet. It charted the flow of trade routes carrying spices and silks, described the different climatic zones from the equator to the frozen north, and documented the customs of distant peoples from the Franks of Europe to the peoples of Southeast Asia. This was a truly cosmopolitan vision. It presented a world where knowledge, goods, and ideas moved more freely than any army, a world linked by the common threads of commerce and curiosity. This Islamic cartographic tradition demonstrates how a spiritual framework could inspire a breathtakingly unified vision of the planet. It was a map that saw connection where others saw division, a testament to the power of faith to draw the world without borders. This same impulse to unify knowledge would soon face a formidable challenge, as a new era of exploration began to reveal continents that these ancient maps had never known. The Arctic ice is never silent. It groans, it shifts, it tells stories to those who know how to listen. For the Inuit, this dynamic, frozen world was not a blank space on a map but a detailed and familiar landscape, meticulously charted in the mind. They navigated a world of constant change where a map drawn on parchment would be obsolete in hours. Their true cartography was held in memory, passed from one generation to the next through stories, songs, and shared experience. An elder would teach a young hunter to read the texture of the snow, the shape of a snowdrift sculpted by the wind, and the subtle color variations in the ice that revealed its thickness and safety. They knew that a specific crack in the ice might lead to a seal's breathing hole, and a particular pressure ridge could signal a treacherous, open channel of water just beyond. This was a science of observation refined over countless lifetimes. The very names they gave to places were not arbitrary labels but functional guides. A coastal inlet might be called the place where the seals are plentiful, while a rocky outcrop could be named for a legendary hunter who found shelter there during a storm. The landscape itself became a narrative, a living archive of community survival and ancestral wisdom. This intimate knowledge created a worldview without hard lines. Territories were understood as shared spaces, defined by seasonal use and mutual respect for the resources that sustained all life. There was no concept of owning the land in a way that excluded others. The ice was a communal highway, a hunting ground, a home, all at once. This stands in profound contrast to the rigid, geometric borders later imposed by distant powers, lines that cut across migratory paths and ignored the living reality of the Arctic. For the Inuit, the map was not a tool for claiming territory, but for understanding a relationship. It was knowledge inseparable from the very act of living in harmony with a powerful and demanding world. From this world of ice and memory, we can lift our gaze to the stars, where another culture mapped the heavens with such precision that their celestial charts still hold secrets for modern astronomers. High in the Andes, the city of Cusco was more than a capital. It was the navel of the world. From its heart, the glittering Coricancha temple radiated 41 invisible lines known as the Ceque system. This was not a map drawn on paper, but a sacred web of energy and order cast across the entire Inca Empire. Each Ceque line was a spiritual artery connecting hundreds of huacas or sacred places. A huaca could be a natural spring, a strangely shaped boulder that told an ancient story, or a towering mountain peak that touched the clouds. These were not randomly chosen sites. They formed a meticulously planned network that organized everything from the calendar of religious festivals to the tax obligations of distant villages. Imagine a vast, invisible spiderweb with Cusco at the center and every strand pulsing with meaning. A specific community was responsible for maintaining the shrines along their assigned Ceque, performing rituals at the correct times to ensure the sun would rise, the rains would come, and the empire would remain in balance with the cosmos. This system brilliantly wove astronomy into the fabric of daily life. The lines functioned as a giant celestial calendar, marking the solstices and equinoxes as the sun rose and set behind specific huacas on the horizon. It integrated hydrology, honoring the sources of water that gave life to the terraced farms. Most importantly, it was a masterwork of social engineering. The empire was a tapestry of many different peoples, each with their own language and traditions. The Ceque system bound them all into a single spiritual landscape, giving every community a defined role and a sacred duty within the whole. This was a map that created unity not by force, but by weaving a shared story of cosmic order. It asked a profound question: can a map hold a society together? For the Inca, the answer was etched into the very mountains they worshipped. This concept of an invisible, binding cartography finds its ultimate expression in maps that were never meant for human eyes at all, maps drawn not on land but in the mind. A map you cannot hold in your hand is not a forgotten map, it is a living one. Across the globe, cultures built entire geographies not on parchment, but within the intricate landscapes of memory. The Navajo people, for instance, did not chart their homeland with lines and dots. They wove it into the very structure of their most sacred ceremonies and stories. Their world is defined by 4 sacred mountains, which mark the cardinal directions and serve as the spiritual pillars of their existence. Within this bounded space, every canyon, every mesa, and every spring holds a place in a vast, interlocking narrative of emergence and journey. This is not a map you look at, it is a map you perform, you chant, and you live, ensuring the land and the people remain in a state of beautiful harmony. Deep within the Amazon rainforest, another form of mental cartography flourishes. For the many tribes who call this labyrinth home, the forest is not a confusing tangle of green. It is a multidimensional library. A hunter does not simply see a tree. He reads its bark for clues about animal activity, identifies the medicinal properties of a specific vine, and knows that the faint sound of a particular bird indicates a clearing or a river is near. The entire ecosystem is understood through a web of relationships. The map is updated with every journey, every story told by the fire, every observation of a fruiting tree or a shifted animal trail. This knowledge is dynamic, shifting with the seasons and the rains, a perfect adaptation to an environment that is in constant, vibrant flux. What makes these mental maps so profoundly different from our own? They prioritize process over pinpoint location. A Western map might show you where a lake is, but a mental map from an indigenous culture will tell you when the water is sweetest, which spirits reside there, what plants grow on its shores each season, and which animal paths lead to its banks. It encodes time, spirituality, and ecology into a single, fluid understanding. This form of cartography is the ultimate in sustainability. It requires no paper, no ink, no satellites. It is carried lightly in the mind, instantly accessible to those who have been taught to see, and it leaves no physical trace upon the land it honors. This challenges our most basic assumption that a map must be an object. It suggests that the truest understanding of a place is not something you own, but something you internalize and carry with you as a guiding wisdom. The landscape becomes a part of you, and you, in turn, become a part of its ongoing story. Yet, even these profound internal landscapes sometimes found expression in physical form, not as charts to be followed, but as beautiful and mysterious objects that encoded the world in ways we are only just beginning to decipher. A single surviving fragment of parchment can shatter our understanding of history. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Pirry compiled a world chart from sources spanning the globe, a document that would become one of cartography's greatest enigmas. His map, drawn in Constantinople, was a mosaic of knowledge. It integrated the latest Portuguese explorations of the African coast. It relied on Arabic geographical texts, and it cited, in its own marginal notes, even older source maps, including some from the time of Alexander the Great. This was not a map drawn from a single viewpoint. It was a collaborative vision, a synthesis of intelligence gathered across empires and centuries. The most startling feature is the landmass sketched at the bottom of the map, a place we now call Antarctica. The chart shows a coastline free of ice, a detail that seems impossible for a map drawn in the 16th century. How could Pirry have known what lay at the bottom of the world, a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 300 years? The map itself offers a clue. Pirry wrote that he had used 20 source maps, including one drawn by Christopher Columbus. He claimed some of these charts dated back to the ancient library of Alexandria, suggesting he was working from a lineage of lost knowledge, a thread of geographical understanding that was snapped and forgotten. This fragment is a ghost, a whisper of a far more complete global vision that once existed. It proves that the secret cartographers were not always working in isolation. They were often the great compilers, the admirals and scholars who sat at the crossroads of the world, gathering charts from ship captains, translating texts from foreign libraries, and weaving it all into a single, more complete picture. The Pirry map is a physical testament to this cross-cultural exchange. It shows a world stitched together from many eyes, a world without a single owner, drawn before the age of national borders permanently carved up the globe. Its existence forces a haunting question. If this one fragment survived by chance, how many other world maps depicting other lost continents or forgotten seaways have turned to dust? The search for these lost visions leads us to another artifact, one that is not a map of the world, but a key to its very dimensions. A splash of yellow ink on aged parchment depicts a landmass west of Greenland labeled Vineland. This simple drawing, known as the Vineland Map, ignited one of the fiercest debates in the history of cartography. If it is real, it is nothing less than a bomb dropped on the conventional narrative of discovery. It would prove that knowledge of the Norse voyages to North America, once thought to be a forgotten secret, was not only preserved but was integrated into a European worldview decades before Christopher Columbus ever set sail. The map suggests that a handful of scholars in the 15th century were aware of a continent across the Atlantic, a secret geography that could have rewritten the future. But is it real? Modern science has cast a long shadow of doubt. Analysis of the ink revealed the presence of a synthetic compound, anatase titanium dioxide, a substance not commercially available until the 1920s. To many, this is the smoking gun, proving the map is an elaborate and brilliant 20th century forgery, a deliberate attempt to reshape history for fame, fortune, or sheer intellectual mischief. Yet the controversy is far from settled. Some researchers argue the compound could be a contaminant or a result of the ink's natural degradation over centuries. The debate rages in scientific journals and hushed library halls, a testament to how difficult it is to pin down the truth of the past. But the enduring power of the Vineland map does not rely solely on its authenticity. Its true allure lies in what it represents, the intoxicating possibility of forgotten connections. We are captivated by the idea of secret knowledge, of a thread of understanding that once linked the Viking longhouses of Newfoundland to the scriptoriums of Europe, a thread that was then lost. The map embodies our collective yearning for a pre-modern world that was more curious, more connected, and far more complex than our history books often allow. It transforms a simple piece of parchment into a battleground for historical interpretation, where every line and every chemical signature is a piece of evidence in a grand trial. We want it to be real because it promises a more interesting story, a world where discovery was a collaborative, global process, not a series of isolated events. This intense scrutiny shows that maps are never neutral. They are arguments, they are stories told by the victors, or in this case, perhaps a story told by a forger. They can be weapons of national pride or tools of deception. The Vineland Map, whether a medieval revelation or a modern fake, forces us to confront a simple truth that every map is a reflection of the desires and conflicts of its time. Just as one culture could chart the stars and another could sing the land, we now find a civilization that sought to map something even more elusive, the relentless flow of time itself. The Aztec scribe did not merely draw a city, they painted the cosmos in miniature. In the Codex Mendoza, the founding of Tenochtitlan is an event both historical and divine. At the center of the page lies the iconic eagle perched on a cactus, a vision sent by the gods. But this symbol is not isolated. Radiating from it are the city's 4 districts, drawn not just as administrative zones but as the 4 cardinal directions, a microcosm of the universe itself. The map is immediately surrounded by a visual record of conquest and tribute, listing the goods demanded from subjugated towns. Yet even this display of political power is framed within a deeper truth. The entire document is a single entity, a fusion of space, time, and sacred duty. It tells the Aztec ruler that his authority is not just over land, but over a people whose destiny is interwoven with the gods and the relentless turning of the calendar. This is a map where a list of blankets and bags of cocoa beans exists alongside the foundational myth of the people. The political and the spiritual are one and the same. The borders of the empire were not just lines on the ground, they were the outermost ripple of a cosmic order centered on the temples of Tenochtitlan. This holistic vision finds its ultimate expression in the Maya codices, which are perhaps best understood not as books, but as instruments for tracking time itself. The Dresden Codex contains incredibly precise astronomical tables, predicting the movements of Venus with stunning accuracy across cycles spanning hundreds of years. For the Maya, a planet's path was not just a celestial phenomenon, it was a divine actor influencing the fate of kings and the success of harvests. To map the sky was to map the flow of time and destiny. Geography, genealogy, and prophecy were all threads in the same grand tapestry. A single page could guide a ritual, record a royal birth, and predict an eclipse because in their worldview these were not separate events. They were interconnected nodes in a living universe. This profound fusion of the temporal and spatial offers a radically different way of seeing our place in the world. It suggests that to truly know a place, you must also know its story in time, its relationship to the stars, and its role in a larger cosmic drama. This is a map that includes not only where you are, but when you are and why you are there at all. A master Feng Shui practitioner does not see a hill, but a resting dragon. In the ancient Chinese art of geomancy, the landscape was alive with a vital energy known as Kai, and the cartographer's task was to map its invisible currents. These were not maps of ownership, but maps of resonance. They charted the dragon veins, the powerful energy lines that coursed through mountain ranges, and they traced the benevolent flow of water, which was seen as the conduit that collected and nourished Kai. A city founded at the confluence of 2 rivers, nestled in the protective embrace of hills, was not just strategically located, it was spiritually aligned. The entire purpose was to position human life, a home, a grave, a capital city, in a spot that harmonized perfectly with these natural forces. To build against the grain of the land was to invite misfortune, while building with its flow promised health, prosperity, and longevity. This created a cartography of profound relationship. The value of any single point was determined entirely by its connection to everything around it, from the distant mountain that was the dragon's head to the nearby stream that was its lifeblood. The map was a guide for weaving human existence into the existing cosmic tapestry, not for cutting a new pattern out of it. This philosophy stands in absolute opposition to the maps that would later emerge from an age of empire and extraction. Where a Feng Shui map sought to understand a landscape's energy for integration, a colonial map sought to inventory its resources for exploitation. One was a blueprint for balance, the other a ledger for possession. This deep reverence for invisible forces naturally extends beyond the flow of the land to the very presence of the sacred within it. The world mountain of Meru rises not from stone and soil, but from the depths of spiritual imagination. In traditions from Hinduism to Buddhism, this colossal peak stands as the universe's central axis, the axis mundi around which all of existence revolves. The continents, including our own world of Jambudvipa, are arranged in concentric circles around its divine slopes, with the whole system surrounded by an impassable wall of mountains and a vast cosmic ocean. This is not a map you could ever walk, but one you are meant to contemplate. It provides a profound sense of cosmic orientation, placing humanity within a grand, layered hierarchy of heavens and hells, deities and demons. The purpose of such a map is not to guide a traveler across a desert, but to guide a soul through the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. It answers the deepest questions of where we truly are in the grand scheme of things. This sacred cartography reveals a pattern found across the globe. From the Norse Yggdrasil, the world tree connecting 9 distinct realms, to the Aboriginal Dreamtime, where ancestral beings shaped a landscape imbued with spiritual power, cultures have independently envisioned a cosmos structured around a central pillar. This recurring motif of a world axis and a surrounding ocean seems to be a fundamental human intuition, a shared psychological blueprint for making sense of a vast and often mysterious universe. These metaphysical maps chart the ultimate pilgrimage, the journey of consciousness itself. They delineate the inner territories of virtue and vice, enlightenment and ignorance. The most significant borders they show are not between nations but between states of being. To study such a map is to undertake an inward expedition, to navigate the geography of your own soul. This remarkable human capacity to chart the invisible required a unique and sophisticated set of intellectual tools, a cartography of the mind that predated our physical instruments by thousands of years. The secret cartographer's most essential tool was a body trained to read the world. A Polynesian navigator, alone on the deck of a voyaging canoe, would stretch out an arm and use their hand to measure the precise angle of a star above the horizon. This simple act transformed their own body into a living sextant, calibrated by a lifetime of practice. They did not need a magnetic compass when they could watch the golden plover fly. They knew this bird always returned to land at dusk, and its steady flight path became a living arrow pointing toward invisible islands beyond the curve of the sea. Every sense was tuned to the environment. Taste could reveal the subtle freshness of water from a distant river carried miles out to sea by currents. The feel of the wind on the skin, the smell of certain blossoms carried on the air, all these were data points in a vast sensory navigation system. In the frozen north, Inuit elders crafted intricate temporary maps from snow. Before a journey, a hunter might sculpt a 3-dimensional model of the coastal landscape, carefully shaping the bays, the pressure ridges, and the safe passages through the sea ice. This was not a map to carry along, but a teaching tool, a way to transfer a complex mental image to the next generation. The student would walk around the model, viewing the terrain from every angle, imprinting the knowledge into memory. The map itself would soon melt away, but the understanding it conveyed remained solid and reliable. This was technology in its purest form, using the materials immediately at hand to encode and transmit vital wisdom without leaving a permanent mark on the world. Perhaps the most beautiful of these tools were the stick charts of the Marshall Islanders. To the untrained eye, they appear as abstract sculptures, delicate frameworks of palm ribs tied together with coconut fiber, punctuated by small cowrie shells. But they were, in fact, brilliant diagrams of the ocean's hidden architecture. The sticks did not represent landmasses. Instead, they mapped the refraction patterns of ocean swells as they bent and interacted with unseen islands. The cowrie shells marked the locations of the islands themselves, while the curved and intersecting sticks showed how the swells would wrap around them, creating a predictable interference pattern on the water's surface. A navigator would feel the rhythm of the waves beneath his canoe and compare that living motion to the mental image of the chart. He was reading the ocean's own signature. These tools shared a common philosophy. They were not designed for pinpoint accuracy, but for interpreting a living, breathing world. They required the human mind to complete the circuit, to connect the diagram to the sensation, the model to the reality. This was a sophistication built on deep ecological literacy, an understanding that true knowledge came from relationship, not just measurement. It stands in stark contrast to the passive reception of a GPS signal, which gives a location but tells you nothing about the journey, the currents, or the stories held in the landscape around you. These ancient tools wove the traveler into the fabric of the world, creating a bond of understanding so resilient that it could guide humanity across the greatest expanses on Earth without a single line drawn on a page. A song can carry a mountain, a story can hold the precise angle of a star. For cultures that mapped without writing, the human voice itself was the most sophisticated data storage system ever devised. The vast geographical knowledge of the Polynesian navigators, the intricate Arctic coastlines known to the Inuit, the sprawling songlines of Australia, all of these lived and breathed in epic poems, rhythmic chants, and ceremonial dances. This was not a primitive form of record-keeping. It was a highly refined technology of memory, designed to encode immense amounts of information in a way that was both unforgettable and deeply meaningful. In West Africa, the griots or jollies were the living libraries of their people. A single griot could recite the entire history of an empire, tracing the genealogies of rulers back for centuries, but they held far more than just names and dates. Their epic narratives, like the Sundiata epic of the Mali Empire, were also geographical masterpieces. They contained descriptions of trade routes, the locations of vital water sources, and the boundaries of territories defined by natural landmarks. To hear the story of a king's journey was to learn the map of his kingdom. Across the sea in Scandinavia, the Vikings used a different kind of poetic map. Their skaldic poetry was dense with complex metaphors known as kennings. A simple phrase like the whale road did not just mean the sea, it evoked its vast, living, and treacherous nature. Sailing directions were woven into these verses, describing coastal features, prevailing winds, and the sailing time between points using the rhythm of the lines themselves as a mnemonic device. The knowledge was locked in a beautiful cultural code. This system of oral transmission had profound advantages. It kept knowledge dynamic. A griot or a Polynesian master navigator was not simply reciting a fixed text. They were recontextualizing the information for their audience, updating a route based on a recent landslide, or emphasizing a different seasonal marker based on a strange turn in the weather. The map was always current. It was also deeply protected. This knowledge was not written down for anyone to find and potentially misuse. It was passed only to those who had earned the trust of the community and undergone years of rigorous training. The map was a secret, a key to survival that belonged to the people who depended on it. This living archive was the ultimate expression of a map as a process, not an object. But its strength was also its terrifying vulnerability. The entire cartography of a culture resided in the minds of its elders and its trained custodians. When those chains of transmission were broken by disease, by violence, or by forced cultural assimilation, the maps did not simply fade. They vanished in a single generation, as completely as if a great library had been put to the torch. The loss was absolute, and the world was left permanently poorer for it. A line drawn with a ruler on a map in a distant European capital could silence a song that had guided a people for 10,000 years. The colonial project was not merely a military and economic conquest, it was a cartographic one. European explorers and administrators arrived with a new kind of map, one that treated the land as an empty space to be measured, divided, and owned. They saw the intricate mental maps of the Inuit as ignorance, the songlines of Aboriginal Australians as myth, and the sacred geographies of the Americas as pagan idolatry. These living cartographies were dismissed as primitive superstition, unworthy of consideration against the precise, geometric lines of their own charts. This was a clash of worldviews so fundamental it reshaped the planet itself. The colonial map was a tool of possession. It used straight lines and right angles to carve ancestral territories into properties and colonies, slicing directly through migratory routes, sacred sites, and the heart of communities. A single border, like the one drawn across the Great Plains of North America, could cut a bison herd off from its calving grounds and a people off from their spiritual centers. In Africa, European powers gathered at the Berlin Conference and used rulers to divide a continent among themselves, creating nations that grouped historic enemies together and split unified cultures apart, a legacy of conflict that echoes to this day. This new cartography was not a neutral act of surveying. It was an imposition of a worldview based on division, ownership, and resource extraction. The land was no longer a relative to be known, but a commodity to be taken. The secret knowledge of the secret cartographers became a casualty of this process. When elders who held the songlines were displaced or died, the map died with them. When Polynesian navigation was banned by missionaries, the star compass faded from memory. This was not a natural forgetting. It was a great erasure, a systematic suppression of entire libraries of human ecological and spiritual wisdom. The fragmented, bordered world map we accept as normal today is a direct result of this historical moment. It is a map of conquest, not of connection. To recognize this history is to understand that our modern atlas is not the only truth, but one version of reality, and a comparatively recent one at that. It forces us to ask a profound and urgent question. In an age of ecological crisis and deep social division, what timeless wisdom did these silenced cartographers hold? And what can their vision of a world without borders teach us now about living in balance with our planet and with each other? A new generation of cartographers is now quietly stitching the world back together, not with lines of ink, but with threads of recovered memory. This movement, often called the decolonization of the map, seeks to heal the wounds left by centuries of imposed borders by reviving the very worldviews that were systematically erased. It is not an attempt to erase modern geography, but to enrich it, to layer the deep time wisdom of indigenous cultures over the precise grids of satellite data. Across Australia, anthropologists are working with Aboriginal elders on a monumental task, using digital tools to record and map the intricate pathways of songlines before they are lost forever. These are not mere GPS tracks, they are living databases of lore, history, and ecology, now being preserved in a new medium for future generations. In the Pacific, the same voyaging canoes that once crossed the ocean by the stars are being built again, and young people are learning the ancient art of wayfinding, not as a historical curiosity, but as a vital science of observation and environmental connection. This is a powerful form of cultural resurrection, a reclaiming of identity that is literally charting a course back to a more holistic way of seeing. Even our most ubiquitous digital maps are being transformed. Interactive online atlases now allow you to toggle a layer that reveals the original indigenous names for mountains, rivers, and towns, names that often describe the essence of a place rather than just marking it for ownership. Seeing the name Katahdin appear over Mount Katahdin in Maine is not just a label change, it is an act of recognition, acknowledging that the mountain was known and revered long before it was ever surveyed. This process forces a fundamental shift in perspective. It asks us to accept that the standard world map hanging on our classroom wall is not an objective truth, but a single, culturally specific argument about how the world is organized. The Mercator projection, which grotesquely enlarges the landmasses of the global north, is a perfect example of a map that presents a political perspective as geographical fact. Decolonizing cartography means making space for other arguments, for maps that prioritize relationship over possession and flow over fixity. This intellectual expansion is a form of healing, a way to mend the fractured relationship between humanity and the planet by relearning the languages in which the Earth first spoke to us. The ultimate goal is a new synthesis, a cartography that can hold both the pinpoint accuracy of a satellite and the profound meaning of a song. The same migratory bird that once guided a Polynesian navigator now appears as a data point on a conservation biologist's screen. The principles of the secret cartographers are no longer confined to history books. They are being actively revived to solve some of the most pressing challenges of the 21st century. Ecologists struggling to protect species like the caribou or the monarch butterfly have begun to adopt the songline concept. They now map vast animal migration corridors that stretch for thousands of miles, crossing arbitrary national borders with complete disregard for human politics. These ancient pathways demand a new kind of map, one that shows connection, not division, echoing the Aboriginal understanding of the land as a continuous, living story. In our rapidly growing cities, the ancient Chinese art of Feng Shui is finding a new audience among urban planners. The goal is no longer to appease spirits, but to create more harmonious and sustainable living environments. By analyzing the flow of wind, the path of sunlight, and the presence of green spaces, planners are designing neighborhoods that reduce energy consumption, promote mental well-being, and foster a greater sense of community. They are, in essence, mapping the dragon veins of a modern metropolis, seeking to build in alignment with natural forces rather than in opposition to them. Even the field of artificial intelligence looks to the past for inspiration. Computer scientists studying spatial cognition are fascinated by the mental mapping techniques of the Inuit and the Polynesian wayfinders. How does the human brain create such detailed and dynamic cognitive maps without GPS? The answer could revolutionize how we design navigation systems for robots and autonomous vehicles, teaching them not just to follow a pre-programmed route, but to interpret their environment in real time, to read the subtle signs of a changing landscape just as a human would. Perhaps the most urgent application lies in the fight against climate change. While modern science has detailed records from only the last century or so, indigenous maps hold millennia of encoded environmental data. An Inuit elder's story about a coastline that was once solid ice is not just a memory, It is a vital data point in the planet's long-term climate history. These oral histories and deep time perspectives provide a crucial context for understanding the scale and speed of current environmental shifts, offering models for resilience that have been tested over generations. This is not about nostalgia. It is a pragmatic recognition that these ancient systems offer a blueprint for interconnected thinking that our fragmented world desperately needs. They prove that this so-called forgotten knowledge is a vital resource for building a sustainable future. To truly apply these ideas, however, requires a profound shift in our own perception. We must learn to see a river not as a boundary line between two states, but as a single, living entity from its source to the sea. We must understand a city not as a collection of properties, but as a dynamic organism breathing with the rhythm of its inhabitants. The secret cartographers left us more than just maps. They left us a new way to see, and in that vision, perhaps a way to heal. These diverse maps all whisper the same radical truth, that the Earth itself knows no borders. The river does not stop at the political line on its journey to the sea. The migratory caribou does not present a passport. The monsoon rains fall on every field without checking its nationality. The secret cartographers understood this fundamental unity. Their maps were not about where one territory ended and another began, but about how the wind connected distant shores, how a mountain range gave birth to the rivers that fed entire civilizations, and how the stars above were a shared compass for all humanity. This philosophy sees the planet as a single, breathing organism, a living system where every part is linked in a delicate dance of interdependence. To draw a hard, unyielding line across this system is to misunderstand its very nature. It is like trying to contain a heartbeat within a single square on a grid. The pulse of the planet flows through every barrier we erect. This is not a call to erase the cultural richness of nations or the practical realities of governance. It is a much deeper plea for a shift in perception. It asks us to see our primary identity not as citizens of a single country, but as crew members aboard a shared planetary home, a home with finite resources and a fragile atmosphere. When you look at a map and see only borders, you see a board for a game of conquest. But when you look at a map and see watersheds, animal migration corridors, and wind patterns, you see a blueprint for collective survival. This ancient wisdom directly challenges the core assumptions of modern geopolitics, which often treats the planet as a chessboard of competing interests. Imagine applying this borderless philosophy to a global crisis like climate change. The carbon emissions from one nation do not respectfully halt at its border. They enter the global atmosphere, contributing to rising seas that will inundate the coasts of another country thousands of miles away. Our current political maps offer no solution to this because the problem exists on a scale these maps were never designed to represent. A cartography of connection, however, would map the flow of emissions, the vulnerability of low-lying regions, and the global pathways of climate refugees, forcing us to see the crisis as the single, interconnected emergency that it truly is. The same logic applies to pandemics, to plastic pollution in our oceans, to the protection of the high seas and the Antarctic wilderness, places that belong to no single nation and therefore to all of humanity. The philosophy of the secret cartographers offers a way out of this gridlock. It provides a mental model for the 21st century, a map not of mine and yours, but of ours. It suggests that our greatest security does not come from building higher walls, but from nurturing healthier connections, from recognizing that the true wealth of any nation is bound to the health of the entire system. This is the ultimate legacy of those who drew the world without borders, a timeless invitation to see the whole Earth as they saw it, not as a prize to be won, but as a living home to be cherished by all. A wooden canoe named Hokulea cut through the Pacific waves in 1976, guided only by the stars her name honored. This was not a replica built for a museum, but a living vessel on a mission to reclaim a stolen legacy. The Polynesian Voyaging Society, led by a determined group of Hawaiian cultural practitioners, had constructed the double-hulled canoe using ancestral designs. More critically, they sought out one of the last remaining masters of traditional wayfinding, Maupiilug, from the small island of Satawul. He was a living library, a man who held the star compass in his mind as his people had for centuries. The voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti was a test of more than nautical skill. It was a test of memory against the vastness of the open ocean. Without a single modern instrument, relying solely on the swell of the sea, the flight of birds, and the unwavering path of the stars, Hokulea found her way. When she landed in Tahiti, she was greeted by thousands of cheering Polynesians, many in tears. The success was a thunderous declaration. The ancient maps were not myth, they were a sophisticated science that worked. This single journey ignited a fire across Polynesia. It was a catalyst for a profound cultural renaissance, revitalizing Hawaiian language, hula, and a collective identity deeply rooted in the ocean. The sea was no longer a barrier that separated the islands. It was a pathway that connected them, just as their ancestors had always known. The Hokulea became a classroom, and her subsequent voyages around the globe carried a powerful message of unity and stewardship. She sailed not as a ship of conquest, but as an ambassador for a planet without borders, her wake a visible line connecting all humanity. The revival of this wayfinding knowledge proves that the wisdom of the secret cartographers is not a relic to be studied, but a living force that can guide us still, offering a beacon of hope for the recovery of other silenced traditions. A realm of eternal spring and perfect peace lies just beyond the horizon of mortal sight. The Greeks called it the Elysian Fields, a blessed afterlife reserved for heroes and the virtuous, meticulously described in epic poetry as if it were a real coastline waiting to be reached. The Celts spoke of the otherworld, a parallel dimension of timeless feasts and youthful beauty, accessible through ancient burial mounds or sudden, shimmering veils in the landscape. In the frozen heights of the Himalayas, Tibetan Buddhists have charted the hidden kingdom of Shambhala, a pure land encircled by snow mountains, its location guarded not by guards but by the spiritual readiness of the seeker. These are not whimsical fantasies, they are the cartography of the human soul, maps drawn not with pen and ink, but with longing, faith, and the universal desire for a world made right. They provide a profound psychological solace, a template for an ideal existence that has guided human behavior for millennia. A warrior facing certain death might be comforted by the detailed map of Elysium, a tangible destination for his courage. A community enduring a harsh winter might gather to hear the descriptions of the Celtic otherworld, its endless summer a spiritual counterweight to their physical suffering. These maps offer meaning that transcends the hardships of the material world, charting a course toward redemption, peace, or enlightenment. This is the ultimate borderless geography. Access to these realms is not granted by passport or nationality, but through inner purity, spiritual practice, or the transformative power of a dream. They exist on a plane that completely bypasses every earthly division of race, language, or creed. To enter, one must cross a threshold within oneself. This deep, imaginative impulse to chart the unknown territories of spirit and psyche reveals a fundamental truth about humanity. Our need to explore and map is not limited to mountains and rivers. It extends inward into the vast and often mysterious landscape of consciousness itself. We are driven to give shape to our hopes, our fears, and our most profound questions about what lies beyond. These mythological maps are just as valid, just as culturally significant as any nautical chart or star compass. They complete our understanding of cartography, proving that to map a place is to give it meaning, whether that place is made of stone or of spirit. From this ethereal realm of dreams and ideals, a powerful, tangible movement is now bringing these unified visions back to the very soil beneath our feet. A digital map glows on a tablet screen held by an elder in the Amazon rainforest. This is not a tool of extraction, but one of reclamation. Across the globe, indigenous communities are partnering with cartographers and using modern technology like GPS and satellite imagery to document what their ancestors always knew. They are not creating maps for exploration, but for restoration, meticulously plotting the locations of traditional place names, sacred ceremonial sites, and the forgotten paths of historical land use. A single mountain, labeled only with a survey number on a government map, might be known by 3 different names in the local language, each one describing a specific event in its creation story or a unique resource found on its slopes. These are not just points on a grid, they are the pillars of cultural memory. These participatory mapping projects are becoming powerful legal instruments. When a mining company proposes a new open-pit mine, a community can present a map that shows how the site overlaps with an ancient burial ground, a critical watershed, and the seasonal migration route of a hunted animal. This visual evidence, framed in the language of geography that governments understand, makes an undeniable case for the land's cultural and ecological significance. It asserts rights not through protest alone, but through the quiet, undeniable power of a different way of seeing. The maps that result look nothing like the cadastral surveys used for property tax. You will not find straight lines or neat square parcels. Instead, you see the land as a living body, with watersheds shaded as interconnected arteries, dotted lines showing the circular routes of seasonal camps, and symbols marking story places where ancestral beings performed their deeds. This is a modern form of secret cartography, using the tools of the present to protect the wisdom of the past. It is a vital act of cultural survival, a declaration that the land is not a commodity, but a relative with a story that must be heard. Your phone can tell you exactly where you are, but it cannot tell you who you are in that place. The blue dot on a GPS screen represents a stunning technological achievement, yet it also signifies a quiet kind of loss. We have traded the rich, multi-sensory engagement of the Polynesian wayfinder or the Inuit hunter for a passive, streamlined instruction: follow the line. In 500 feet, turn left. This system demands nothing from us but obedience. We no longer need to observe the way a certain tree leans perpetually away from the prevailing wind, or how the morning sun casts a specific shadow through a mountain pass to mark the season. The complex cognitive act of building a mental map, of truly knowing a terrain, is outsourced to a satellite and a microchip. This convenience has a hidden cost, a gradual erosion of our own spatial intelligence and our innate sense of connection. Stories abound of drivers who blindly followed their navigation into a lake or down a collapsed road, a literal demonstration of trust in digital abstraction over immediate sensory reality. We are losing the art of being present in our surroundings, of understanding a landscape as a continuous story rather than a series of disconnected waypoints. The deep knowledge of the secret cartographers was not just about reaching a destination, it was about understanding the journey itself, the relationship between the traveler, the path, and the living world. When we surrender this process, we become tourists in our own lives, moving through spaces without ever truly knowing them. This disconnection raises a poignant question. In gaining the whole world of instant location, what essential part of our place within it have we begun to forget? A child closes their eyes and traces the route from their front door to the schoolyard gate, not with a pencil but with their mind. This simple act of creating a mental map is becoming a revolutionary classroom exercise. In schools from Norway to New Zealand, educators are quietly weaving the wisdom of the secret cartographers into their curriculum. Students are not just memorizing state capitals, they are learning to navigate by the stars, to identify edible plants in their local park, and to understand that the creek behind their school has a name and a history known to the people who lived there for centuries before the first map was drawn. This is not a rejection of modern geography, but an essential expansion of it. The goal is to cultivate a different kind of intelligence, one that blends spatial thinking with deep ecological awareness and profound cultural empathy. A lesson might begin with the physics of a compass, then pivot to the story of how Polynesian navigators crossed an ocean without one. Children learn that a mountain can be both a triangulation point on a topographical map and a sacred ancestor in a dreaming story, and that both truths can coexist. They are taught to see their own neighborhood not as a collection of streets, but as a habitat, a network of stories, and a place within a watershed that flows to a distant sea. This pedagogical shift is crucial, for it plants the seeds of a borderless worldview at the most formative time. By learning to see through multiple cartographic lenses, students develop a more flexible and nuanced understanding of their place in the world. They begin to grasp that the same water they drink in their city has touched the shores of other nations, and that the air they breathe carries the dust of distant deserts. This education is a quiet act of resistance against the fragmented, disconnected reality presented by so many traditional maps. It is the cultivation of a generation that can instinctively think in systems, that sees interconnection where others see only division, and that carries within them the recovered wisdom of those who first drew the world as one living whole. The static lines on our political maps are failing us in a world of fluid, global crises. A pandemic does not stop at a customs checkpoint, a carbon emission ignores sovereign airspace, and a rising ocean will claim every shoreline without regard for nationality. We are trying to solve interconnected problems with fragmented maps, and it is a strategy destined to fail. The future of cartography must evolve beyond the fixed borders of the 19th century, embracing instead the dynamic, flowing vision of the secret cartographers. Imagine a digital atlas that lives and breathes, where you can toggle a layer to see the real-time movement of atmospheric carbon, watching it swirl across continents in a deadly, invisible tide. Another layer might trace the paths of millions of migrating people, not as a threat, but as a natural response to climate stress and economic disparity, revealing the deep connections between drought in one nation and urban growth in another. These maps would visualize the planet as a single, pulsing system of cause and effect, where a decision made in a distant capital ripples across the globe. This is not science fiction. Data artists and geographers are already building these powerful visualizations, creating tools that show the internet as a constellation of light, global shipping routes as a circulatory system, and wildlife corridors as the planet's ancient, enduring pathways. These maps do not erase the reality of nations, but they overlay them with a more fundamental truth, the truth of interconnection. They dissolve the illusion of separation, forcing us to confront the simple fact that we are all downstream from someone else, and the air we breathe is a shared trust. This is the ultimate legacy of the star compass and the songline, a reminder that our maps shape our reality. For centuries, we have used cartography as a tool for control and possession. The secret cartographers offer us a different purpose: to create maps that serve life itself. Their wisdom guides us toward a future where we see the world not as a territory to be defended, but as a home to be nurtured together, a single, living whole drawn without a single dividing line. Our journey through these lost maps reveals a planet woven from stories, not separated by lines. We have sailed by the star compass of the Polynesian navigators, walked the songlines of the Australian outback, and traced the sacred geography of the Inca Ceque system. Each culture, in its own beautiful language, drew a world of profound connection. Their maps were not tools for claiming what was theirs, but for understanding their relationship to everything else. They saw the earth as a single, breathing entity where a river was a relative, a mountain was an ancestor, and the sky was a shared, rotating map for all humanity. This vision stands in quiet, powerful opposition to the fragmented atlas we have inherited. The wisdom of the secret cartographers is not locked in the past. It is a living compass for our future, pointing toward a way of living that is more sustainable, more empathetic, and more deeply aware of our place within a delicate, global ecosystem. Their legacy asks us to redraw the maps in our own minds. Look at the world map you know. What rivers does it show flowing from one country into another, yet it labels them as separate? What animal migrations does it silently ignore as they cross its bold, printed lines? What ancient stories are buried beneath the names of cities and borders? The next time you see a map, try to see beyond the divisions. Look for the watersheds, the wind patterns, the invisible pathways of life that make a mockery of our human boundaries. This is the final gift of the secret cartographers, an invitation to see the whole world as one interconnected home. If this vision of a borderless Earth resonates with you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And for more journeys into history's deepest mysteries, please subscribe.